Hello and welcome to the Elder Tree podcast. My name is Twiggy Dawn. I'm the founder of the Elder Tree and Alchemilla Herbals, and I reside on Jitterbug land here in far north Queensland. You are listening to the Herbal Education segment, where each new moon I invite a myriad of plant wisdom keepers to chat about the world of herbal education, about their passions and motivations, and their dreams for the future of herbal medicine education in Australia. This podcast is brought to you by the Elder Tree, a non-for-profit organisation whose mission is putting the medicine in the hands of the people. One of the ways that we are doing this is through this podcast. If you would like to go deeper with the podcast journey while supporting the Elder Tree for as little as $2 per week, then you can become a member of our Patreon. Thanks to all of the people and plants who have helped to make this podcast possible. Today's episode is an explorative conversation with Elliot Brinkley, a herbalist and teacher, and the owner of the inspirational Dancing Willow Herbs apothecary in Durango, Colorado, which is on the land of the Yoot Mountain People. Elliot has a beautiful way of joining the science with practical medicine making and an embodied connection with the plants. She facilitates spaces that invite people in closer to a deeper relationship with herbs and emphasizes the importance of learning herbs directly rather than solely online and in books. In this interview, we explore her internship journey, her journey with studying herbal medicine in USA, and we compare and contrast the different teaching opportunities in USA compared to Australia. Elliot shares some of her favourite heart herbs and an insight into her inspirational offering called Botanical Breathwork. We discuss the importance of connecting to the cycles and the importance of bioregional medicine. Since we recorded the interview, Elliot had to cancel Blooming Rooted in May, but the autumn session will still be happening. Also, her upcoming podcast will now be called The Dancing Willow, which was just launched this week, and you can find a link to it in the show notes. I hope that you enjoy this episode. Not only is Elliot the first international guest that I've invited onto the show, but she's also an inspiring woman on a mission doing wonderful things in her community. It was really nice to tune in with the different education opportunities that are available in Australia compared to the USA. As you would know, if you've been listening to previous episodes on this segment, Australia has very limited education opportunities for herbal medicine, and all of the current schools that offer any kind of herbal medicine training are all highly academic and scholarly, and there are no schools offering hands-on herbal education on the earth. But the Elder Tree is planning to change that, so stay tuned. Hi, Elliot. Thanks so much for joining me here today on the Elder Tree podcast. It's wonderful to have you here.
So happy to be here.
I really love that you get to be our first international guest on the show. And as our listeners would know, that up until now, we've just been kind of showcasing and exploring Australian herbalism, and particularly in this segment around the education in Australia. And I've been interviewing all different educators, different types of teachers and facilitators, and now we get to interview you and talk about the beautiful work you're doing in your community, and also kind of get to see a little bit of the differences and similarities with America and Australia in our educational models and approaches and things like that. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity. So I really love the work that you do with Dancing Willow Herbs. And just as a bit of a starting point, I'd love to hear a bit about your story of how you've arrived into the place that you are now, with running Dancing Willow Herbs and doing all of your beautiful offerings that you're doing in your community.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I feel so honored to be your first international guest. Really, really fun. And everything that we've chatted about prior to this conversation about the differences in Australian herbalism versus American herbalism, it's really, really cool to kind of compare and contrast. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to diving deeper with you. But my journey started at Dancing Willow Herbs, really. I mean, I I've always been somewhat interested in herbalism. My family, my dad's a massage therapist and my mom is a nurse, but also has a lot of holistic side gigs always. So I grew up with herbalism as the main medicine in our household. I wasn't on antibiotics until I was a teenager and had my wisdom teeth removed. I everything was very alternative in terms of our healing. So that was really normal for me, very normalized. And then as I was becoming an adult and wanting to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I decided to explore herbalism more. And it actually, my very first experience was going into my local herb store in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is where I grew up. And I got an herb book. And the guy who was working there gave me a really advanced Matthew Wood herb book that I remember opening it and I was like, I have no idea what any of this means, really. You know, it was all herbal actions. And it was too advanced at the time. But I was so into it, even though I remember reading it and not knowing what anything meant, but reading it and feeling like so attracted to the images and learning about everything. And so it was really something that was so innate that I wanted to learn more. I wanted to get to know the plants. I was really into spending time in nature. And so I was I at the time I needed to go to college here in the States. Well, nowadays a college education doesn't really mean anything, but to my parents' generation that was like you had to have a college education. Now our generation is kind of having the brunt of that, in that most people have crazy student loans and jobs that don't pay for them. But I went to college in Durango, Colorado, which is where I now live and own this herbal apothecary. And I remember the first time we came to look at the college here, we walked downtown and I stepped into Dancing Willow Herbs, which is the apothecary that I now tend. And I walked in, and the smell and the experience of being immersed in herbalism, plants are hanging down. It's a very cozy feel. And at that moment, was like, this is what I want to do. I really want to work here. And so I essentially courted the women at Dancing Willow Herbs, and I was like, you have to give me a job. Please hire me. Please hire me. And they didn't want to hire me because I was a student at the time. And so I actually took a year off because I was in school and I didn't know what I was doing really. I wanted to pursue healing studies, but that wasn't really an option within the mainstream frame. And so, because I took a year off, I was able to work at Dancing Willow because I wasn't technically a student. And so I started out as an intern, and this internship was essentially I would show up one day a week and I would help in whatever way needed to be supported. I would fill essential oils, I would make tea, I would label things, I would bottle tinctures, and I essentially got to be immersed in herbalism and immersed in the shop in that way of like that exchange of my support was given in exchange for learning anything that I could and asking questions and being around all of the people coming in asking for support through the apothecary. And so I eventually got a job at the apothecary, and I was working there one day a week and getting paid for it. And then eventually worked up to be the lab manager where I was making all of the medicine. And so I managed the lab for about a probably a year and a half, 2 years, which was really amazing. I think that that was where I learned so much about the plants just because I was hands on herbs every single day, getting to know all of the ways that these different plants smelled and the way that they blended up in the blender, the way that they interacted with one another when they would come together in a mixture. And so that allowed me to create really deep personal relationships with the plants. And then I ended up going to herb school at the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism, which is up in Boulder. And that was a really great experience because I was able to have all of these initial experiences with the plants of hands-on in the lab. So I already knew so many plants. I had relationships, but then I was able to dive deeper in anatomy, physiology, the mechanism of action of the plants, and really more of the clinical sciencey side of all of this through my schooling at CSCH is kind of how we say it. So that's kind of like my education journey, but the long-winded version. So tell me where you want to go now.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing all of that. I'd love to, yeah, I suppose I'd love to hear a bit about your time at the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism, like, because, you know, in Australia, we don't have one single herbal medicine school. Like, you know, the Elder Tree is going to be creating the only one. Currently, we have different colleges, some small colleges that specialize. They're like natural medicine. There's two kind of health colleges like that have herbal medicine qualifications within them, but mostly it's all large degree, like in the bachelor's degree with the large universities. And there's actually, I think, only now one or two universities, so we have very limited options. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey, just to hear similarities and differences in what it was like for you being a student, and also, I suppose, comparing that well, not comparing, but just exploring, sharing your experience of being in the school, and then also your experience a bit more with learning the herbs in the lab and learning them a bit more hands-on as well. So just love to explore that a bit more.
Yeah, of course. And in the States, it's not standardized, right? So there is such a wide range of what herb school can be. And there are a lot of herb schools that are more maybe just spend it. You go out and you spend time in nature with the plants and you wildcraft, and it's maybe more like about connecting to the plants. Maybe it's a little bit more metaphysical. Those herb schools exist, and then that's maybe one side of the spectrum, and then on the other side of the spectrum it was a school kind of like Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism or the North American Institute of Medical Herbalism, that is more sciency and more from this quote unquote medical herbalism perspective. And because I had so much information from working with the plants, and I really also, before I went to herb school, I was doing a lot with creating with plants and having a spiritual practice around connecting with herbs. And so I felt like I already had these relationships. I knew medicine making, I knew a lot of working with the plants in that more spiritual way. And so I really wanted more of that sciencey side because that's where I needed to grow into. And
Mm.
so it was a really good education for learning all of the anatomy, physiology, all of the different. It was a vitalist herbalism school too, so we did work a lot with energetics and with the ways that the different plants can suit the different people, but in a clinical setting. So it was really a beautiful program. It has since changed quite a bit, I think, since I went there, but it when I was there, there were multiple teachers, and we would have different specialists coming in to teach us about their area of expertise.
Mhm.
And also at this time, this was the early days of COVID that I was in herb school. And so we had hybrid classes where we would have some classes on Zoom and some classes in person. Most it was like in I'm forgetting the term right now of cohorts, the different groups. So we would have at least a couple days a week in person, but then whatever group wasn't in person would be at home on Zoom, hybrid classes. And
Mhm.
so I know that especially in the States, there's a lot of herbal certificate programs that are all online. And while it was nice to do the hybrid classes because I loved to be home and I really loved being cozy on the days that I was home. But I I think that an herb school where you are able to taste the plants, where you're able to meet other people in person and have these connections in this community of other herbalists and really get in-person interface, I think that that is critical and something that is kind of being lost in a lot of the ways that people might be doing herbal education at this time because right it's so convenient to learn online, but herbalism is a tangible skill. Connecting with the plants is its own thing that I don't think can be replicated by just talking about plants or reading about plants. I see so many. It's kind of like how I couldn't get past that Matthew Wood book without having more life context and
Yeah.
getting to know the plants more and experiencing these different herbal actions because if you're reading it, it's just not the same. So anyway, I think that this program was really great for learning more of the sciencey side of things. And also I had a beautiful herbal community of all the people I went through herb school with. And it was a really special time because of that. And we also would do herbal field trips out. We did a whole week of like a camping trip where we sat with plants and had that sort of outside time too. And we also did plant walks, but having that classroom setting, it was definitely more clinical focused, which was really great because that was the missing gap in my experience with herbalism up to that point.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for sharing all of that. Yeah, it's amazing, when schools can create online learning opportunities for people that otherwise can't access it, so that they can learn online. But it's definitely missing that tactile senses engaged, hands-on element. And yeah, in all of my 7 years at university, we never once did a field trip, and they never once brought plants into the classroom or actually touched
Mm.
plants as part of the herbalism and naturopathy degree. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's good to hear there's so many options there, and also that you already had enough at your fingertips that you could just utilize just the academic scholarly side of of the college that you were enrolled in. And so you came to work at first as an intern, which is wonderful. And then eventually you came to manage the lab. And so I'd love to hear a bit about Dancing Willow Herbs, what goes on in the lab, and what kind of medicines you're making, what kind of plants you're working with in there.
Yeah, and I'm realizing I should also mention that so I took over ownership of Dancing Willow Herbs. I've been the owner now for 3.5 years. So I'm like, numbers, the time. When did everything happen? I can't remember. I think 2021.
Yeah.
2021. And so at that time, I ended up finishing herb school, kind of my at fundamentals and advanced program. And I had intended to do a whole clinical program through the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism. But because of the way that it worked out with the business sale and the owner wanting to sell at that time, I ended up coming back early before I finished my clinical program. So I literally signed the papers on, well, I did my final exam one day for herb school, and then I signed the papers on the business the next day. So
Wow.
it all happened a little bit quickly. And so then I had to do my clinical program online. And so I did the Acorn School of Herbal Medicine for my online program, which was really great because it was with Paul Bergner, who is the herbalist who started Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism originally. And so it was great because I got to have clinical roundtable, and that is something that I do think works perfectly well online, because all clinical really is and was, at least in my experience, is I would see clients, and then everything was rigorous notes, and my whole protocol was written up and everything, and we would share that with our roundtable group, and then we would discuss questions we had, ways, things that were good, things that could have done better, all of these different herbal clinical strategies in the roundtable, which is all just discussion based. So that worked really well to do that, and that was with Paul Bergner and Heather Luna, and it was a really, really wonderful experience also. So I was doing my clinical program while navigating owning a business. And also, that first year in business was crazy because a lot of things at Dancing Willow were put in place in the 90s and had not been changed since the 90s. So I had to do a lot of cleansing in that first year, reorganizing things. And so it was a lot, but I'm so grateful to be on the other side of it now. And so to explain a little bit more about Dancing Willow and what we do, Dancing Willow Herbs is an herbal apothecary based in Durango, Colorado, which Durango is a really small mountain valley town in the southwest corner of Colorado. So a lot of people know Denver, Colorado. We're like 7 hours away from Denver, Colorado. We're actually we're like in the little southwest tip. So we're closer to other, you might not know all the states, but New Mexico and Arizona and Utah we're really close to. So anyway, it's a remote little town, and Dancing Willow was originally started almost 35 years ago by Deb Swanson, who studied with Michael Moore. So she created all of these herbal formulas, tinctures, and lots of other things. But really, tinctures are the main thing that we're doing in the store that is probably our specialty. And so she created all of these herbal formulas that I've since tweaked a lot of them. I've introduced my own. I've completely redone our Bath and Body line. I've really changed a lot about our teas, but the core of it, the original format, was created by Deb, and it is really so fun and beautiful that we make all of the products that we sell out of the store in our apothecary. So we have a lab in the back where we percolate all of our tinctures, or we'll do fresh plant macerations with local plants. And we make oils and salves, and we have just bulk herbs everywhere. We're always trying to figure out our organization for that. But we are making all sorts of different products in our lab that then we sell out of the store.
Beautiful. Um, Thank you for sharing all of that. And what kind of plants are you like fresh macerating? Like what kind of fresh plant tinctures are you making?
So I love this. I love fresh plants.
Mm-hmm.
It's so I work with local farms that supply us things that we do fresh, that are really, we can't afford to do everything fresh plant. And so we really prioritize the things that are essential to do fresh plant. So, for example, milky oats is one
Mm-hmm.
that we only will tincture fresh plant milky oats when they are in their milky latex stage. So, that's something that we tincture, and we actually use a method where we'll blend up the milky oats and the alcohol right when we first receive them, and then let that sit, and just the blending up, it's milky oat smoothie is what we always call it. And tincturing that, allowing the milky oats to extract in that medium, it it has created the most nourishing and beautiful milky oats tincture that I have ever personally worked with. It is the most beautiful, vibrant, light green color. And you can see when it's on the shelf, and you can see the separation of the milky latex in the tincture. It's just so beautiful and nourishing. But we also do valerian fresh plant, ashwagandha fresh plant. We'll do, oh gosh, skullcap, motherwort, holy basil. Really, as much as we can source locally to do fresh plant. Oh, St. John's wort is a major one that will only work with fresh plant for
Yeah.
our oil and also our tincture. And so it's really just, it's kind of that middle ground of what we're able to get in our local bioregion, and also what is worth buying that fresh plant, bulk, for making really good medicine. And so
Mhm.
we work with local farms to get all of our calendula sourced locally. And so we get that dried from them, but that's something that we really prioritize, because it is just night and day local calendula versus calendula you can buy from any really of the herb wholesalers.
Yeah, a lot of it, by the time it gets to you, it's a brown or a pale yellow and has lost so much of the
Yeah.
vitality and the properties in it. Nothing like fresh
Yeah.
calendula, freshly dried calendula.
Yes. Oh, so beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing all of that. We don't, yeah, we don't get much like milky oats around where I am, because I'm kind of where I am is in the subtropical kind of area, but all the rest of the plants we grow. And definitely, yeah, St. John's wort is one of those ones you've got to do fresh, right? And even like the motherwort, I just find the potency. I mean, you could say it for all of them, like using when you've got the fresh plants. There's so much more than just the compounds and phytochemistry, that goes into the brew. It's like the vitality, the essence, the energy, that life force, that kind of goes into the brew too. So I don't do much on the percolation side of things, but fresh plant tinctures are definitely a great love. And it's great to see you light up when you talk about it, because yeah, I feel the same. And so in your shop then, with these medicines you're making, like, you also have like a dispensary, like a clinic, or are you doing over the counter style? What's your way of dispensing?
So we have all of these different tincture blends that are the formulas that we sell out of the store that are always on our shelf. Like Peaceful Heart, for example, is our best-selling formula, and it's
Hmm.
milky oats, motherwort, and skullcap. And that's really great for anxiety and stress. And so of course it's the
Hmm.
best seller, because everybody's anxious and stressed.
Yeah.
But we have all of these formulas in which there are formulas, we always have them. And then in terms of custom formulas, we will dispense single herb extracts. So behind the counter, we have where people can just buy a single milky oats tincture, or a single motherwort tincture, or single valerian, or something like that. And then when it comes to custom formulas, the way that we do it is we work with all of the naturopaths and other kind of healers in the area who want to create customized formulas for their clients. They will send us their clients' formula, and we'll make it up for them. And vice versa for all of my clients. I create customized herbal formulas for them, and which will fill out of the shop. But a lot of times people will come in and they'll say, "Hey, I got this tincture from the grocery store. Can you recreate it for me? And it's like 7 different herbs in it. And we don't have a huge staff. So there's usually one, maybe two, but usually just one person in the front of the store holding things down. And it's too much to fill complex formulas for people. So we'll do like 2 or 3 herbs that will combine for them, but that's kind of our maximum if they don't have a quote unquote prescription from a uh, practitioner.
Mhm. Wonderful. Beautiful. I'd really love to try your blend with the milky oats and the skullcap and the motherwort. I make the skullcap and motherwort fresh plant tinctures, and the motherwort is definitely my best seller, my most popular remedy. Just it really is like a herb of the times. I think everyone needs a hug from the mother, and we're kind of a little bit on overdrive, aren't we? And most of us, generalizing in the kind of Western culture, most people are kind of maxed out, working really hard, and there's a lot of things to be worried about, and yeah, a lot of energy, a lot going on. So and anxiety and stress is pretty much almost accepted as a daily normal reality. So having the support from those kind of herbs is can be really helpful. So motherwort's been a great ally for
Yeah.
me, and also like just on the motherwort, I know we were talking the other day about like herbs for the heart, and I love working with herbs for the heart, and I know that you do too, because they're working on not just on the physical, they're also working energetically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, on so many different levels they're working on. So I'd love to hear a bit about how you work with heart herbs and your approach to it. And yeah.
Yeah, well, so in the shop we have Peaceful Heart, which is, like I said, our best-selling formula, but a close rival, which has been a creation of my own, is our Rooted Heart elixir. And this one is more, so I always say Peaceful Heart is a little bit more directed towards the physical, the stress, the anxiety, the tightness in the chest, heart palpitations, sort of like, oh my gosh, feeling. And the Rooted Heart is a little bit more energetic, emotional support. So that's really
Mm.
specific for the person who feels like a lot, who feels overwhelmed, who feels the feelings of everybody else, who feels the weight of the collective, who feels like maxed out nervous system. And that's because the herbs in that formula, the Rooted Heart elixir, it's also 3 herbs. It's rose, reishi, and hawthorn.
Mm.
And I actually created this blend when I was in herb school. And I had all 3 of those herbs on my shelf that I had personally at home tinctured and created. And I was like, you know what? And it was during COVID. I was like, this I think this would be a really nice combination. And I really found that, so rose and hawthorn, of course, are beautiful heart tonic herbs that affect us not only on the physical level, but this emotional level of the spiritual heart. And those herbs help bring us into our heart space, while the reishi
Mm.
helps bring us even deeper than that. And all 3 of those herbs are what are considered Shen tonics in traditional Chinese medicine, and really help us to access our heart, to find the purpose that is held within our heart space. And so I always take Rooted Heart elixir before I teach, or before big challenging conversations, or if I'm just crying and need a hug by the herbs. So yeah, I really do love working with these herbs that not only are helping to support us on this physical level, but also the more spiritual side for personal growth. But I will say another thing that I think you'll find is interesting. Being in the shop, it's almost like magic because we can watch, and I don't know if it's collective awareness and what a lot of people are needing at the same time as a theme, or if there's some literal magic that's happening in the shop, because we will watch. So for example, rooted heart elixir, maybe it won't sell for, I don't know, several weeks or something. We won't sell any rooted heart elixir. And then one day we sell like 10 bottles of it. And rooted heart elixir is maybe not the best example because that is more of an emotional collective thing. But even something like our bitters tincture, something more random, physical oriented, people will just, it's like, I don't know if there's some magic of like energy that something happens in a place that somebody
Mm.
decided that this is valuable, and then the next person who comes along sees it and wants it, or if it is this collective thing. But it's interesting to witness how people interact in the apothecary, and how the plants maybe are also a part of that dance on a level that we can't see.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, there's all the mysterious weavings and the collective wisdom, the collective processes that we have. I love the rooted heart blend. The rose and the hawthorn are such like classic heart herbs to me, but the reishi, that's yeah, something that I wouldn't have thought to connect. And something. Can you tell me more about reishi? Like we have an Australian native reishi here with like some similar but different properties, and can you tell me more about the reishi in that blend and why that's in the heart blend?
Totally. Yeah, so in my experience working with reishi, there were several years in which I drank reishi every single day, and I would always drink it in the evening when I was winding down. And I just feel, and maybe it's the quality of it being a mushroom and having that sort of connected mycelial nature, just decomposition, grounding energy, that it has always to me felt like I can, as somebody who's pretty sensitive, and usually by the end of the day, I can kind of feel maxed out, like my nervous system has had enough. And so reishi is really supportive for at least me in feeling that I can come back to myself and almost like take all of the little feelers that I've had out during the day and all of these different ways that I've been out in the world, and come back to my body, come back to who I
Mm.
am, and root down into the earth. And I think it's really a beautiful remedy for people who feel the collective and who feel what is happening in the world on this more energetic level, to just kind of descend. And specifically, I use it a lot for people who are on their phones or are on technology all day, and then they have a really hard time tapping, like disconnecting from that technology and coming back to their body, coming back to the real world. And a lot of this is based on just my experience with reishi. And of course, there's so much literature out there about the ways that it's adaptogenic, and it's also really good for helping with organs of elimination, our liver support. And I always think, when you taste reishi, if you have good reishi, it should taste bitter. And that bitter flavor has such a descending quality.
Mm.
Anytime we taste something that's bitter, even as I talk about bitter, right? I'm starting to salivate,
Yeah, me
but
too.
that bitter, only herbalists would do that, I think. But there's this quality of, as we're stimulating digestive juices, we're stimulating peristalsis, we're stimulating digestion, and that has a descending tone to it. And so
Mhm.
I think that reishi is a really beautiful herb for helping to just ground and settle the nervous system. And in traditional Chinese medicine, it is also considered a Shen tonic. And the Shen is something that resides. The Shen is, and also I'm an herbalist who's trained in traditional Chinese medicine concepts. I'm not a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner.
Mhm.
So what I understand it as is Shen is kind of like it resides in the heart, And it is like our purpose, our connection to life force in this world, and our sense of belonging, our sense of living in vitality in the way that we are connected to our purpose. So that's why I think that reishi, especially in combination with the rose and the hawthorn, those two herbs are distinct, like getting you into the heart. But reishi takes it even further beyond that into maybe the nervous system, into the body, into the depths of like allowing us to really settle into who we are, into our purpose, and into our heart.
Hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and balancing out the the rose, like the flower and the berries and all of the kind of higher, lighter energies, having that yeah, reishi, that connectedness deep down in the earth, kind of through the networks. And yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I ran with a friend. I ran the year before last. I ran a women's retreat for a weekend called Rose Petal Heart, and it was, yeah, really beautiful to
Oh,
get to like journey with the rose for a whole weekend and really feel the power in a group and see the way that she kind of the what the energy when you create those groups, you get to really sense the plant in a totally different way to when you just work with it one on one, the straight with the plant. And I know that you also do that. Like I know you do guided spaces with just one plant at a time, like with your botanical breath work, and I think with other spaces as well. And yeah, I'd love to hear. Yeah, just change direction a little bit and hear a bit about your work with singular plants, your work with botanical breath work, and your work with holding space for one plant at a time in a collective group, and the beauty in that.
yeah. Well, I do teach classes at Dancing Willow, and I try to create classes for all sorts of different spectrums of people in the way that they connect, right? Because not everybody, it's comfortable for them to connect in like a more spiritual way with the plants.
Mhm.
But so maybe we'll have other classes for different topics that are maybe more accessible. But I do really, really love, I created with a dear friend this concept of botanical breath work. And she's a longtime breathwork practitioner. She trained with my uncle, who I guess I could say I'm also a longtime breathwork practitioner, but it's not as much my calling as it is hers. You know, I brought the herbs to the experience and she brought the breathwork to it. And since we created that, I've started doing it on my own because she lives in New York. So she lives across the country. So I'm doing it on my own at Dancing Willow, and it's been a really beautiful process of watching the ways in which people can connect with plants on all of these different levels. Because in the botanical breathwork classes, it's centered around a single plant. So, for example, last month we did pine. It was January, so it was a good time to be working with pine. And so in the beginning of the class, I have people taste the herb and we talk about the ways that that flavor impacts maybe the energetics. Like, do they think it's hot or cold or moist or dry? What do they feel in their body when we taste this plant? And then we'll go into all of the medicinal qualities, all of the ways that you might be able to harvest and work with the plant, all of the ways that this plant also has insight beyond just the medicinal qualities. And so we'll kind of explore it in all of these different ways. And then we have people lay down to do a breathwork experience. And it's an active breathwork meditation that I also pair music with it. So the playlists I try to make in a way that is in alignment with the plant. So the one with
Mhm.
pine was really fun and easy, like lots of earthy songs, you know? But people will lay down and do this breathwork experience, which also has the power of really moving emotion and stagnant energy, which I think is really helpful for bridging, getting out of the mind, because it's like we have that whole first part of the class to be in the mind, and then we're able to get into the body and incorporate whatever came up, whatever stagnant emotion needs to move through, so that you can just feel kind of clear energy in alignment with your spirit and the spirit of the plant that we're intentionally working with. So it's been a really beautiful experience. And as is the case in any sort of plant meditation, quote unquote, it's always so cool to see the ways that the plant and the themes that people's experiences are colored with has a lot to do with the medicine of that particular botanical.
Mm. Beautiful. And so because you offer these as well online, right? Like, so for our listeners that are in Australia, can they access your botanical breathwork online?
Yeah, so I am planning to start experimenting with recording them. We'll see how that goes. And so stay tuned.
Yeah, beautiful. I think it
Stay
sounds like
tuned.
a
We'll see.
wonderful thing. I haven't heard of anyone doing anything like that. It's a really beautiful, unique offering. So I'm sure that people's ears will be perking up when they're listening to this, and they'd love to know how they can access that. But yeah, it's really beautiful. You're creating that space to explore with one plant at a time, because it's something that I'm also really passionate about, just immersing into one plant at a time. So and it's something that often gets lost in the learning environment. At least over here in the universities, you're often learning like 6 herbs per class, and you're just
Mm-hmm.
kind of skimming over it, really. And well, in depth in some ways, but not really actually getting like all the energetic, the sensual, the embodied side of things. So and getting that plant connection, and really being able to drop in on a deeper level. And yeah, like you say, a lot of people are uncomfortable with that, but it's nice to kind of gently challenge that discomfort and welcome people into that space. I was running a workshop yesterday and was getting people to be with the elder tree, the elder plant, and sit and feel it, and
Aw.
be present with themselves and the plant. And it was challenging for a lot of people, to do that, because a lot of us in our busy lives don't really take that time out, or we haven't been taught that. We don't even know how to start with creating that connection. And especially when we're in a world of like, oh, have a bit of this, a bit of that, or do this, do that, and we're kind of getting a little bit ADD even in our connections. We're not really being like, I'm just going to be with this one plant and just be with the plant, even just talk to the plant, feel the plant, breathe with the plant, have those kind of deeper experiences. And I feel like it really informs, like, practitioners. I think that's really important for practitioners to be bringing that into their practice, to have that connection with the plant. So yeah, it's beautiful that you're creating those spaces. And also, like, I know that you are also passionate about like seasonal herbalism as well, like, and passionate about embodied and connected herbalism. So, there's in Australia, I don't know, I don't think it's like this so much in America, but like the standard over here is that the naturopaths and herbalists have dispensaries that are primarily, or pretty much the standard is that like all of it is been made elsewhere, generally made overseas, and has been imported, or at least the dried herbs been imported to somewhere, and then made. But the practitioners aren't making it. The dispensaries that you buy it from generally aren't making the medicines, and so we lose the seasonal elements. We lose that fresh plant connection. And yeah, I just wonder, like, is it like that? You know, uh, Whether or not you do things differently, but is that the kind of standard fare in the US, or is it more the standard fare that dispensaries are having more connection with the actual plants, and so getting them seasonally, locally, like what you do a lot?
I think that it really depends, because both exist. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot, if you are buying herbal supplements or herbs in any way at the grocery store. It's been made in a laboratory, who knows where. And but if you're getting stuff from your local apothecary, chances are they made it, or somebody else who's like a small business made it, at least in a lot of these areas where there are herb schools, I would say. So I know there of several in Colorado who have a similar frame to the way that we do things and manufacture products in house. And I know of several in like on the West Coast that do a similar thing, like specifically around Oregon and Washington, because there's an herb school there as well. So I wonder if it might just be a little bit more so around the areas where there are herbalists already, but it's both, because I can't sell my products at, nor would I really want to sell my products, but I couldn't sell them at a place like Whole Foods. Or I don't know if you guys have I mean, probably because it's such a mega chain.
And my partner just got back from
And
Las Vegas a couple of days ago and he was talking about Whole Foods. So I actually just heard about it this week for the first time. But yeah, it's a
okay,
big
yeah.
chain.
It
Yeah.
used to be, yeah. It's a big chain of like a health, quote unquote, health food store. It's not really anymore. They bought it out and now you can't really, it's not good quality. But a lot of people will there are a lot of supplements there, and people will go there to buy supplements. But all of those supplements in these like major grocery stores have to be made in a designated laboratory that is not, so like the way that we do it is a little bit more small scale. I always say we're a boutique herbal apothecary because
Hmm.
it sounds fancy, but also because that's the truth of it, is that we're doing things on a really small scale, and so therefore we're serving our local community, and we're also serving a lot of people within the US that we ship products to. But it's a small little operation. I think that that's happening in a lot of places, but then there's also that more large scale. And honestly, with AI, I've been realizing that it's a really good marketing point that I can say your herbal products are handmade, because a lot of
Mm.
things that you're buying that maybe you're getting off of a grocery store shelf, those are made not only in these like huge manufacturing facilities, but they're made, a lot of these places nowadays don't even have humans operating things, they have robots operating them. And so I'm like, we're making the medicine. Your herbs are made by humans. And that's like a whole energetic side of things that
Mhm.
I think is going to become more and more important as that sort of takes control.
Yeah, yeah. So it's so important to keep that connection, like people hand harvesting the herbs and hand processing and just having our energy going into that, because every step along that like affects the outcome of the medicine, right? It's like not just about having fresh medicine, but the vitality of somebody lovingly making something. Like when you have a home cooked meal from someone who just loves to feed people and loves to make beautiful food that'll make people happy. You can taste that, you can feel that in the food, and that like that intention energy goes into your body. But when you're having something that's just kind of mass processed in a big factory, it doesn't hold that vitality, doesn't hold that energy the same way. All right. So I know that something that we both share in common is a passion for working with the seasons and with the cycles of nature, and I also know that we're in different hemispheres. So it's so interesting that for us it's like summer right now, and it's winter for you, and you're sitting there with your beanie and your jumper, and I'm sitting in a t-shirt, and yeah. So it's always interesting. We're in totally different worlds in that way, but we're both still working with those cyclic awareness and doing our offerings with cyclic awareness. So I'd love to hear a bit about um, Well, I'd love to know about your beautiful offering, Blooming Rooted, because I know that that does work, with the seasons and the cycles. And yeah, we'd just love to hear a bit about your ways of working, your wisdom around working with cycles and rhythms.
I would be happy to share. Blooming Rooted is something, it's an herbal retreat that I first did last year. And so it's interesting how I love to work with herbs seasonally. I think it's a really important piece of it. And based on the season we're in, right? So for me right now, winter, I'm doing a lot of decoctions and working with more berries and roots and mushrooms. And you're on the other side of summer. And so in the summer, I like to work a lot more with like flowers and the things that are blooming and the leaves and all the things we're able to access at that time. And so I love to create offerings around this, but I didn't actually do it intentionally. It just worked out. And so I last year, but it's so interesting how every piece of the offering has happened on these quote unquote like holy days.
Mhm.
And so I had a dream last winter solstice that I was going to be holding a herbalism retreat. And in the dream, it was a women's retreat, but Blooming Rooted, I've opened up. I mean, this last year we had all women and one man, our sweet Will. So, so it naturally is predominantly women, but men are welcome as well. But I had this dream about facilitating a retreat on the night of the winter solstice, and then it was kind of a stirring within me. I knew that that was something I wanted to do. It was like that idea came to me. And then on Imbolc, which is February 1st in this hemisphere,
Mhm.
I had this really strong feeling of, okay, I should look into some different venues, some options for places I could hold this retreat. And I reached out to several different places, but I heard back from Deer Hill, which is where I hold the retreat now. And Deer Hill is actually a center for outdoor education for children, but it's great because it's kind of like a campy vibe, and you can rent out the facilities, which is a beautiful workshop room and all of the grounds and a lot of really amazing, just really beautiful perfect for a big group. So anyway, I reached out saying I wanted to do this, and the only spot that they had available was over the summer solstice. And it was also like partly available. They were going to let me know if it happened. And so I was just like, if it's meant to be, it'll be. And the space opened up and it all unfolded. It was the most beautiful space I've ever held. It was so, so special. And so it was great because we did a lot around the summer solstice and around working with that time of the year, and all of the herbs that we worked with were very attuned to that season. We worked with St. John's wort. We also worked with OSHA, which is something that's really unique to our bioregion here in Southwest Colorado. And is like the medicine of the bear. And it was so interesting. I saw a bear afterwards. So everything was very serendipitous around these seasonal points. And so this year, when I reached out to see what days were available, the only dates that were available were the first weekend in May, so Beltane, and the third weekend in September, so the autumn equinox. And so I had kind of played around with the idea of doing two offerings, because when we did, I mean, after the summer solstice one, it was so incredibly beautiful. And I left the weekend and was like, I could do this. I could turn around and do it right now again. That's how amazing it felt. So we were talking about potentially doing two sessions. And so I think that it's really cool to see how it's evolved, and the spirit of Blooming Rooted has kind of found a way for itself in this year at least. We have the first week of May, which I really feel like we're going to be working a lot with Beltane, with these spring moving into summer herbs like
Mm.
elderflower and hawthorn flowers and rose and lilac. and violets and, all of those beautiful ethereal blooms. And it's kind of like the blooming, right? And then in September, when we're working with fall, we're going to be doing a lot with roots and mushrooms and berries, and that's like the rooted. So it's kind of cool how it's evolved to be on either side of the summer season, and we get to really explore these different themes of herbalism. And what I uh-oh oh it's okay, sorry. What I love about this offering is, so it's a 3-4 day herbalism retreat where people come, and it's not only about learning about the plants, but also this conjunction of personal transformational healing and herbalism. So we get to explore the herbs through all sorts of different ways, like being in nature with them, doing a plant walk or an herbal farm tour. I'm really excited to potentially go visit an herbal farm with everybody and harvest some plants and medicine making. We have different sorts of embodied herbalism experiences where we'll get to taste the plants and learn about them, but also even see how we might be able to create with them and dance with them and move with them and make music or art or whatever we're feeling called to do. But also we'll be doing botanical breath work, and it's great because I have a whole team too, and one of my dear friends is going to be offering tea ceremony in the mornings, which is, last year it was such a beautiful way to start the day. So it's just a really fun experience, and it's kind of the same way that we were discussing before about how we can have this embodied herbal learning that's not just the sciencey stuff, because we'll go there, we'll talk about the sciencey stuff, but we'll also get to actually meet the plants in their whole form. We'll get to taste the tea, we'll get to go in nature, we'll get to do plant meditations, we'll get to find community around all of this experience too. So it's a really beautiful way, I think, to learn about plants in that all embodied experiential way.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. There's so much. There's so much in all of that that I just want to dive into each little bit. Where to start? I really love that you've, honored a dream that you've had on the winter solstice and birthed this really beautiful offering for your community that not only brings them closer to having, embodied connection with the herbs, also gives them more of an awareness around cycles, the cycles of nature, and brings people closer to nature and closer to themselves, and awareness of their own inner rhythms and cycles. And it's a really beautiful thing. And you had the St. John's wort there on the summer solstice, because it's a real summer solstice, light, harnessing all of that beautiful power of the sun and right at that point, and then having that available in the depths of the winter, of the darkness of the winter, having that bottled and ready to bring that light into a dark place. And we actually, on the summer solstice just gone, I ran a elder workshop, and it just so happened again that it was like that was the weekend, the only weekend that it could be. And I was like, well, of course, because that's elders,
Mm-hmm.
that's also elders time, is that's the most auspicious day and period for the elder as well. So it's nice to have that awareness, with the plants. And I love what you were saying about the bringing in the creativity. That was something we had a good laugh about in a previous conversation, because I also have that with my work, with my offerings, is getting people doing song and dance and drawing and creatively connecting. I call it. It's the term that I've kind of given it, and I hadn't encountered anyone that seemed to share that. And I'd love for you to share a bit more just in that little rabbit hole of just that creative connection, and what you think the benefit is of that, and how you go about bringing that song and dance and art and creativeness into the herbal space. Can you talk more about that?
Of course. This topic I think is so fun because it takes it beyond just learning about the plants, because still, even when we're learning or doing a plant meditation with the intention of getting to know a plant, we're trying to get something from the plant. We're
Mm-hmm.
always trying to either extract information, or we're trying to get the medicine. We're trying to kind of we're receiving a lot from plants all of the time. And I think that creative expression is a really beautiful way in which we can exchange with the plants and actually give them something back. And it ends up being a co-creation where the plants, I think, really love it when we create about them. I think that they feel honored. I think it's also a way that we can learn about the plants in a much deeper way. For example, when I was in elementary school, I remember always, if we were told that if we finished our work early, we needed to help the person next to us. And I loved that. It's always stuck with me because I feel that I only know something when I teach something. Like, if I can therefore explain something about whatever topic, that means I really know it. And I
Mm,
feel like creativity is a step further than that, in a way that we actually can get to know the plants and give them something back and interpret our our experience with them, because creativity is a really great doorway to the intuition and to our own personal relationships with the plants. And so I think that it's just a really, really special way to connect and also give back to the plants that we're working with in this more, I guess, spiritual, but not, it doesn't have to be, way.
mm. Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's beyond spiritual. It's just like awareness, awareness of like, yeah, cycles and patterns of nature. And it's actually really interesting, you know, that we're having this conversation as well, because just this morning I dropped off my daughter to a Steiner. She goes to a Steiner school. I don't know if I think they call it something different. In
Waldorf.
Yeah, Waldorf. Yeah, and so we dropped her off there, and I was explaining to my friend about the differences and about that awareness of the cycles of nature and how they work with creativity. It's so embedded in their teaching format, is that there's everything's through song and dance and art, and like most of the time, you know, the kids aren't even aware that they're necessarily learning. They're not just having information shoved into their heads. They're bringing it into their bodies. They're bringing it into all different hemispheres. Both hemispheres of their brain are being like activated, you know, in this like really engaged learning. And it's something that I always really loved about the Steiner model, and always have grieved about the state schooling model over here. At least I don't know what it's like in America, but the state schooling or the public schooling is very like rote learning. It's like, repeat after me, okay, now you know the fact, and sit at your desk. Everything's very linear in boxes, and it's just engaging the mind and leaving out the whole rest of the being. And it's not teaching, yeah, the children how to think for themselves, how to even feel, you know. So it's, I've always loved it about Steiner school, but it's only been more in more recent times that I've actually understood, seen how to weave that into, like, as being a herbal medicine teacher, how to bring that into the space and the benefit of that. And it just surprised me that it took me so long to kind of cotton onto it, and it actually was like quite by accident. It was actually, I was trying to hold a space of teaching people, you know, helping them to learn, remember how to connect to plants and feel that connection. And people were kind of like, oh, I'm trying to feel, I'm trying to feel, I'm trying to like have an experience. And they're kind of like in their minds trying to have this experience. And I just could, I was stumped as to how to, like, how do I help someone else? And then it was like, well, okay, write a poem for the plant, you know, like sing to the plant, like romance, like you know, maybe dance for the plant, like, do, you know, I started just kind of throwing some ideas out there, and then the results were incredible, like of what that, how much that was helping people to start to, you know. And even going into the mythology, well, look at the history of the plant and the mythology and the kind of the stories, and the bring in that storytelling atmosphere into the space, and that kind of creativity, you know, and the imagery and the imagination and all of that, you know. And then what that started awakening, suddenly then all these people are having like full-blown conversations with the plants and walking out and being like attuned to what the plant needs, and then actually starting to get more and more attuned about how to work, use that medicine in their lives. And yeah, and then what emerged from that space was that, exactly as you said, it was the perfect answer to this issue we're having in modern times, where most of modern Western civilization is seeing plants as a commodity and a resource and a thing to be kind of taken from, and not and a lot of us are like aware of that and not even sure how to give back or how to have that relationship that's a two-way street. And I really feel like that, yeah, creating that creativity is a real piece in that, it's taken me a long time to realize how important that is. And it's so true what you said, that then developing that creativity, utilizing, working with that creativity actually helps to develop intuition. It actually helps us to go like beyond the mind, into our gut, into our instincts, into our like deeper inner knowing, because we're getting past the facts, like the mental, yeah, that things have to be a certain way. And then what's also then emerged from that space for me is like an awareness. Once I started really leaning into that and working with that, I started realizing that the plants are evolving. They're not just calendula is good for this, that, and the other. And so I should work with it in the way that people have worked with it in other lands for so long. It's like, well, actually, the calendula growing on this land has changed the same way that my ancestors come from Europe, but they've been here for generations, and we've changed in because of the landscape. We've changed because the earth and the songs and everything here is just like so different that it changes us. And the plants, realization I've come to is that they're actually no different in that way. Like, they're evolving, they're changing. And so the calendula that's growing in your community compared to here, compared to, where it comes from, is like very different. And so the medicine, the result is different, and the connection is different. So yeah, and there's always the similarities, it's always the things that will probably remain, but there's also some things that change over time. And so it keeps the relationship alive. When you realize, for me, when I realized that, was that like, oh, this is like a human relationship. It grows and shifts over time and needs maintenance, and I need to learn who you are now, not just like who I thought you were last week. And yeah, that's been a big thing. So I'd love to hear more about, yeah, what your realizations or your experiences have been with bringing in more creativity and intuition into the herbal space.
I think that that was so beautifully said. And that is why bioregional herbalism is so important. That's why it's important to, especially where you guys are in Australia, since everything's being or imported from other places, making your own medicine, growing the herbs, doing the things so that you have that vibrant medicine that is around your place. And vice versa here, there's such an aspect of what grows here, like Osha, for example, is a really specific plant to this place. And we don't recommend people working with it. Like, it's a very, very powerful herb. And so we are stewarding it in a way that's like really, really sacred and protected. Like, we don't share that medicine with everybody. And it is something that requires a lot of reverence. And so I guess in terms of expanding any more into the creativity aspect, I think that you said so many beautiful things. I don't know that there's much more I could add besides that this is why it's important to work with the plants around us and to keep developing relationships through creativity, through tasting them, through noticing what your experiences are, and not only relying on classroom learning or books, because at the end of the day, the plants are changing, which I think is such a beautiful and important point. And we are changing. And that was something that in herb school, there were several incidents because we were doing herb of the week every week. So we would have a specific plant, a single plant that we would be working with on a weekly basis. And then at the end of the week, we would all have to write up our herb of the week sort of, I guess, monographs, but they were really in depth based on our personal experience, the different preparations that we tried of the plants, and then our experiences in trying them, in organoleptics, like what they tasted like, in the way that they felt in our body, in energy, in all of these different realms, right? And then we had to read everybody else's. So we would have to read, I think, like three, because it would be a lot of work to read everybody's. But every week we would have to like read and review three people's herb of the week. And so it was a really great experience for getting to see how individually people would experience these plants and also experience things that were not in the books. For example, passion flower was one that in the books, you'll see that it is calming, it soothes racing thoughts, it helps you fall asleep. It's just a great soothing nervine. But so many people in our cohort of class had adverse reactions to passion flower, where it would actually do the exact opposite and make their mind race even more. And so that's not something that's very common to read in books. We just read that it's calming. And so you wouldn't know unless you were doing this self inquiry and working with and trying these plants, how they affect you specifically, and also how maybe they're evolving and how you're evolving. And it's always a different match. Like people often come into the apothecary and they'll ask the question, how is this going to affect me? And I can say, this is how these herbs typically work. However, it's always a crapshoot to an extent. We don't know for sure how everything is going to work and interact. We can create a foundation, and it's quite unlikely maybe for certain herbs to have specific action. But at the end of the day, there's so much variation in all of us as humans and the factors of medicine making and herbalism as a whole. So that's why it's so important to develop your own relationships and also develop a relationship with your body and your creativity and your intuition so that you can essentially know what's happening.
Mhm. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I like that you were using the example of the osha root, the bear root there, because that, that is such I was first introduced to that herb by Stephen Harrod Buhner, like in his books, and when some friends had some root here and they wanted to serve some up, and I felt really uncomfortable about it, actually. Like, I was like, oh, that's like a really, it's not a herb in great abundance. It's been wild harvested over there. And, what do we have here that could, not necessarily native, but like even that we can grow ourselves? Because I don't know anyone growing osha over here. So, yeah, and I felt really uncomfortable about it, and I didn't want to drink it. And I didn't, make any issue about it. There's no judgment on anyone else, but it just didn't feel right, for me to have it. I was curious, but, it didn't feel right. And something that's there is something that's quite a difference between where Australia's at in herbalism and where America's at in herbalism, is that our colonization has happened a lot more recently and a lot more violently with the indigenous people here. And so their knowledge to the native medicines here has been quite disconnected and fragmented, within the last even 100 years. And, there's a lot of trauma in that. And there's a lot of the information that remains within them, the traditional knowledge that's being kept, isn't quite so readily shared, because, they've already had so much taken from them, and within their lifetimes, within their parents' lifetimes. So, yeah, we're in a very different place in that, and where it's harder to really, but then there's also companies stepping in and wanting to, what's the word, like kind of to have that, utilize that resource of the native medicines that are gaining popularity and wanting to commercialize them. And there is that kind of going on, but from a herbalist perspective, it's kind of it's a tricky place, so it's hard to connect, hard to feel like we have the right to connect with a lot of to utilize a lot of the native medicines here. So that's quite a difference where as to where we're at. And so, yeah, we do rely on herbalists in Australia generally aren't working with native medicines as a generalization. And it's something I've always kind of watched what's happening in the States and seen a lot more of the native herbalism is a lot more intertwined with the Western herbal medicine. There's a lot more there, whereas the herbalists mostly over here are like purely Western herbal medicine, a little bit of Chinese herbal medicine training. Um, but even that's been all pretty much phased out of the big universities and colleges. And so, yeah, it's an interesting point to be in. Yeah, we definitely don't want to be importing our herbs, but we're still developing, making the repair with the indigenous people and developing that relationship over time to be able to access in a good way to access the native medicines. So we're kind of left with trying to grow the plants of our ancestors. For most of us, the herbalists here, most of us are Europeans as a generalization there. So, and then that's an interesting thing because, like, where, for example, the climate that I'm in right now is a subtropical climate. So, and I've just come from a very tropical region, coconuts, mangoes, bananas. And so where I am now is actually quite similar. You can grow, and so most of our like kind of classic Western herbal medicine, all of our calendula and the motherwort, the skullcap, and all of that. It's often in the winter that we're harvesting. Like winter is our time to harvest those things. So just on that seasonal awareness
Oh,
thing,
wow.
so much of it kind of goes out the window for me because like not only are we in a totally different hemisphere, but then we're also in this like interesting in between realm. So yeah, and then so it's interesting to try to apply some of the things that I've learned from teachers in other climates across to where we are right now, because things are going to flower at different times, and you wouldn't harvest the calendula in the summer here because it's all just rotting in the wet season. So it's like, yeah, it's just like a totally different ballpark. So it's like we're still finding our way. So
Yeah.
basically what that kind of makes me have to do is just throw a lot of it all out the window, like all the books and the teachers from other places, and then I just have to be more present to just observing, being in observation on this land in this place right now, and being like, okay, that's flowering now, what does that tell me, or how do I work with the medicine in a different way? So yeah, just more and more learning how to engage that intuition and that observation, and trusting, like you say, trusting the body and trusting my own instincts or my own thoughts. And yeah, so it's just such a interesting meandering journey, yeah. So but yeah, thank you for everything that you shared around that. I think it's such a big topic, and it's like it's actually really really important. I think it should be like the fundamental first thing that's taught, especially the seasonal awareness, is something that should be the first thing taught at schools before anything else, even before the anatomy and the physiology, and before the anything, is like that seasonal awareness in your region. But it's a little bit missing, at least over here in the schools. So I didn't learn about it at all at university. It wasn't really a discussion. There was the
Mm.
understanding that just herbs would be available all year round, the same herbs in brown bottles, like you could have a dispensary all year round of just the same herbs. Who knows where they come from, kind of thing. Yeah, which is a sadness, but it's just the way that it is. So yeah, and I would really love, something I've really advocated for on this podcast is that, until now, I've, for the last almost 2 years, I've just interviewed people within Australia, and I've really advocated for people connecting to Australian wisdom and Australian offerings. And now I'm feeling that, like, that opening up to something different, and there's so much different wisdom that can come for people being able to access someone like you and your offerings and your perspectives and your ways of doing things. So I would love if you could share with us, particularly online, I suppose, given that, yeah, most of our listeners are in Australia. yeah, just how can people access you and your teachings online, especially? Just you could share with us some of your things that you're currently offering, upcoming offerings, and any things that are kind of in the pipeline that we should start getting excited about as well.
So I am starting a podcast.
Woohoo.
It's called Within the Willow. Yeah. So you should be able to find that wherever you get your podcasts, called Within the Willow. And so that's an exciting thing that hopefully anybody can tune into. I also, on my website, have online classes available. So my website is dancingwillowherbs.com. And I'm hoping to figure out recording botanical breathwork. It's just tricky because I also do music in it. So it's not just an audio recording. I want the music to sound good. So I have to do a little bit of figuring out, but that is life. And so hopefully we'll have some botanical breathwork offerings on the website in the future. But also I have a really valuable newsletter. So if you want to go on and even look at our blog post, there's a lot of good information there, and sign up for the newsletter, and then you'll be able to see the upcoming podcasts and also botanical breathwork offerings. And we've got Instagram, Dancing Willow Herbs Co. Although I've been trying to be a lot better about that. It's a tricky balance, right?
Hmm.
But I think those are some of the things for people who are in Australia. And if anybody's listening and is local to the US, if you want to fly over the pond, come and join me for Blooming Rooted Retreat. That is also on my website, the details there. So happy, so lovely chatting with you and getting to connect, and also compare and contrast how herbalism is here versus there. And it it's so interesting how our environment really can dictate the way that we connect with plants. And until meeting you, I really didn't understand quite the ways that, the pros and cons, I guess, of being where I am and versus, there. And so it's really interesting to connect, and I'm just so in awe of all the things that you're doing, and so excited for your herb school, and so excited to continue listening to all of your guys' beautiful podcasts and offerings, and just just so honored to be here.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Elliot. Thank you for everything you've shared today. And for anyone listening, all of the links, all of the offerings that Elliot just spoke about are all in the show notes. There'll be a bunch of links there for you all to click. Yeah, and thank you. Thanks for bearing with me with all of the technical side of things and the different timelines and everything. But I'm glad that we can make this happen. It's really beautiful to meet you and to have you on the show. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Herbal Education segment of the Elder Tree podcast. Stay tuned every new moon as I interview more wise and inspiring herbal educators and herbal lore keepers from around Australia. If you would like to go deeper with the podcast journey, you can become a member of the Elder Tree Trove on Patreon. Contribute as little as $2 per week to access free content from our interviewees, and also access discount codes and opportunities which are exclusive to our members. You can find us on Patreon by going to www.patreon.com/The Elder Tree. Other ways that you can assist us in getting our offerings out there to more people in Australia is by subscribing and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and on the Spotify app. Also, liking, commenting on, and sharing our social media posts actually has a really positive impact and helps us to reach further with the message from all of the amazing herbal lore keepers that we interview on this podcast. Thank you so much for your support, and have a most wonderful day.